chapter. So if you want to hear it, you can either go back to our recordings from chapter 1 up to 28, or you wait to the next cycle, but that will maybe take some years. So chapter 28 of Acts, verse 1 to 16. Once safely on shore, we found out that the island was called Malta. The islanders showed us unusual kindness. They built a fire and welcomed us, all because it was raining and cold. Paul gathered a pile of brushwood, and as he put it on the fire, a viper, driven out by the heat, fastened itself on his hand. And when the islanders saw the snake hanging from his hand, they said to each other, "This man must be a murderer. For though he escaped from the sea, the goddess Justice has not allowed him to live." But Paul shook the snake off into the fire and suffered no ill effects. The people expected him to swell up or suddenly fall dead. But after waiting a long time and seeing nothing unusual happen to him, they changed their minds and said he was a god. There was an estate nearby that belonged to Publius, the chief official of the island. He welcomed us to his home and showed us generous hospitality for 3 days. His father was sick in bed, suffering from a fever and dysentery. Paul went in to see him and, after prayer, placed his hands on him and healed him. When this had happened, the rest of the sick on the island came and were cured. They honored us in many ways, and when we were ready to sail, they furnished us with the supplies we needed. And then we continue in verse 11. After 3 months, we put out to sea in the ship that had wintered in the island. It was the Alexandrian ship that was with the figurehead of the twin gods Castor and Pollux. We put in at Syracuse and stayed there 3 days. From there we set sail and arrived at Rhegium. The next day the south wind came up, and on the following day we reached Puteoli. There we found some brothers and sisters who invited us to spend a week with them. And so we came to Rome. The brothers and sisters there had heard that we were coming, and they traveled as far as the Forum of Appius and the 3 taverns to meet us. At the sight of these people, Paul thanked God and was encouraged. When he got to Rome, Paul was allowed to live by himself with a soldier to guard him. Right. Let's first pray. Lord, we come to you as we sit here. Now, we don't need to introduce ourselves to you because you know us, and we believe that. But we want to praise you because it's good to be here in your house. I pray, Lord, as we sit here, that we hear what you have to say. That we see you for who you are. That we see Jesus Christ for who he claims to be. For whatever feelings we have here, for whatever doubts or difficulties, we ask you to take care. Be with those who are not here, maybe brothers and sisters who live or stay abroad. Maybe they go through challenging times. Be with them, Lord. Speak to them in your time, in your way. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. If I would ask you to think about a person that made a dramatic change in his life, who would you think of? I don't ask for answers, so keep it just for yourself. I can tell you who I thought of. You wouldn't expect that probably. I thought about Ebenezer Scrooge. That's the guy a figure from the book Charles Dickens. And he starts off in the movie and in the book as a man who is really kind of, let's say, in trouble with everybody. He hates everybody. He doesn't like anyone. He's making trouble with everyone. And towards the end of the story, he changes. and he becomes most likable, and he starts to like the people he has hated before. Big change. You could also think, for those who were here the last couple of weeks and months, of course, much easier to remember and to think of, Paul. You know, he hunted Christians, and after one day, he started to proclaim the gospel. Big change. 180 degrees. Transformation. Almost unrecognizable. Now, can it also happen the other way around? Because these were positive stories. You change from something not so good to something very good. Imagine, you come somewhere, you're welcomed, like in this story, with unusual kindness. And something happens, hey, you are a murderer. And then something happens, or doesn't happen actually, you are a god. For one of the change you would be happy, for other change you would maybe be disillusioned. Why do people change, and why do people change so quickly sometimes? Or change opinion so quickly? This passage helps us to get an understanding somehow. We see unusual kindness from people towards strangers. And we could wonder, where does that come from? Or we see radical and hasty judgment of the same people on the strangers just because something happened. Something bad happened. And we wonder, how do I deal and interpret bad circumstances that can come my way? Right? I think all of us might have experienced that. And if you not have yet, well, still listen, because it might happen one day. So the main point, with God at the center of everything, we grow our understanding of human kindness. That's the first point. And the second, we learn how to deal with bad things. So with God at the center of everything, we grow our understanding of human kindness. So what is happening here? I think it's really the continuation of the story that we heard last week when Matthias preached. So there's a storm, 276 men got safely ashore. They found out it is Malta. Most of us will probably know where that is. And then the islanders showed unusual kindness. And I find it remarkable because, I mean, you might experience that, but why would you write that down? And they helped building a fire, and they gave them warmth, and they were really warm people, so to speak. And also in verse 7 you see, the kindness shows up in Publius. He's the kind of governor of the place. And he had also a special gift. He was basically very generous in his hospitality. For 3 days they could stay. Now, Paul heals his father when he sees that he is sick. He's suffering from fever and dysentery, through prayer and through laying on hands on him. And all the sick come to him and they are cured. Quite remarkable, right? Unusual kindness. Where does that come from? Yeah, I wonder. You would say, the people of Malta, are they just nice people? I checked it on the internet. And it says really, Maltese people are very warm, hospitable people. And I saw the source, it's coming from some tourist office. I thought, okay, people from every country are warm and hospitable if it's coming from a tourist office, right? So what is it here? I think there is something that we know and the Bible teaches us, which we call common grace. And for those who were here some months ago, they remember that we looked at that in Acts 14. Paul and Barnabas, they healed a lame man in Lystra. And then the crowd shouts, the gods have come down to us in human form. You might remember. Now Paul says, no, wait, I'm just human too. I'm not a god. And then he continues, turn away from worthless things to the living God, he says. And in the past he let all the nations go their own way, but yet he has not left himself without testimony. God God said, or Paul said about God. He has shown kindness by giving you rain from heaven and crops in their seasons. He provides you with plenty of food and fills your heart with joy. So the origin, the giver of good to all people is God. It's not to Christians only, it's to all people. Common grace. To broken people included. Acts 17 verse 24 to 28. There Paul says, he's speaking in Athens on the Areopagus. He says, rather he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. God gives everything to everyone, whether they recognize it as from him or not. Psalm 145 verse 9 speaks also, the Lord is good to all and his mercy is over all that he has made. Same theme. Matthew 5, Jesus speaking. God makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. Now, you say, okay, what happened there then exactly? Did he speak nice words and then they start being kind? It doesn't say it at all. They were just kind. Did Paul preach the gospel? It doesn't say. Might be. But for sure we see that he responded. He responded to this kindness by showing gospel love and gospel deeds. How? By offering the kindness and apostolic healing to these unbelievers. So what is the application for us? Very simple, actually. If people are kind to us, I see it as God's care. And what else do we do? Respond with kindness, with gospel deeds, with gospel love. We're taking the opportunity to introduce people to the gospel. Not hitting on the head, but just sharing where we can. So the first point is, with God at the center of everything, we grow in our understanding of human kindness. And we call that theologically common grace. Now the second, we learn how to deal with bad things. That's a big theme, so I will narrow it down a bit, so stay with me. It's a bit of a process, but let's work through it together. So what is happening there? Verse 3, Paul, okay, he was a prisoner, but he was just helping, right? Taking the wood and get it together on the fire. And then he's bitten by a viper, by a snake. So Paul is not, let's say, excluded from human peril. It hits him too. It hits everyone now and then. And he has a lot of mischief in his life, as we have seen before. And then the islanders saw a snake hanging from his hand, and they said, this man is a murderer. Okay, he escaped from the sea, but a snake bite, that shows it. The goddess of justice will not allow him to live. Now, Paul shook the snake off his hand, and they were waiting till he would fall dead, or something, he would swell. Actually, that didn't happen. They did watch him, they say a long time, I don't know, it doesn't say how long, but time enough to make sure something could happen. It didn't happen. And they changed their mind and said, he's a god. And when I read that at first, I thought, and that's, I think, all how we respond. We tend to say, I think, because I suppose you have the same response, possibly, superstitious people. Maybe we think religious people, simple people. No, look at us. We are more developed, we are more sophisticated, we are more progressed. We have the enlightenment behind us. So we know about science, about scientific results and processes. We don't easily change our mind. We need to have proof, right? Now, there was a scholar who basically pointed me to something else here. These people saw, talking about enlightenment, they saw natural light. What do I mean? They saw some divine truth. They did see something which is truth. The initial response that they give is telling us that they believe there is a God. Let's start there. There is a God. And he's above and beyond everyone. And his providence, his way of looking ahead and ruling the world, excludes coincidences. That's also what they say, kind of. There's basically no good or bad luck. It's in his hand. It's all divinely orchestrated. And the second thing they see, and you can conclude it from how they respond to him, to God, is the vengeance, which means basically he will reckon crimes, right? He will ultimately be the judge. He will judge everyone and everything. Okay, that is truth about God. However, the Maltese, how friendly they are not seeing everything. Their, let's say, natural light is defective. It's incomplete. It's not fully correct. How do we know? Because they reason as follows. Good people will prosper and bad people will suffer. Good people will be rewarded, bad people will be punished. So by implication, when you suffer, you have done something wrong. Now before we say that is simple, that's a bit regressive, let's think this through. I think it shows us that the common human belief when we get to deal with bad circumstances. It is very often the way we look at things. How do we process, explain and even justify bad things happening to us or around us? So the common human belief, bad people will suffer bad consequences. Now religious people say, by divine judgment. And by religious people I mean people who are in a religious tradition. And they could be monotheists, people who believe in one God, or in multiple gods, polytheists. And they are basically in the state of, I belong to the institute, and that's what I believe. And irreligious, you could say modern people, but it doesn't really make sense, but let's say irreligious people, they might say, no, we don't see any evidence for the divine. Let alone that we'll see that there is divine determination. Forget it, of the things that are happening. We believe that everything goes by the laws of nature. That determines what happens. And only the thing we can prove scientifically that we see as objectively true and valid. Now there's a third way, I would say, which I would call the Christian faith, the gospel, the way, which is basically very distinct from religion. Some of you might know, we have talked about it before. I will come back to that a bit later. So religious people, God is above everything and everybody. He reckons, he judges, he punishes the wicked people. So if there's a God exists, he will punish the wicked people. And he will reward the good people. That's very often the flip side. Irreligious people say, bad things do happen, but that is just bad luck, right? It shows how life works. The strong eats the weak. It is just the survival of the fittest. There is no really good and bad luck in this. It's just nature. It's a series of chemical reactions in living organisms and including in people's brains. Nothing more. A snake in the wood, that happens naturally, of course, can happen. So think about now, we walk here in the street. You walk through the street and a roof tile comes down. It hits your head. Laws of nature, laws of gravity, what do? Now you say, of course, rightfully you would say, wait, is there nothing I can do? Well, of course, there's something you can do. You buy a helmet and you walk around in Alicante with your helmet on. And if you don't do that, you're stupid, right? So either it is the law of nature, we say, stick to that and you have to deal with it, or you have to do something, you will be smarter. All right, keep that in mind. Now, it comes anyway to the question. We talked about bad consequences, bad things happening. What is bad anyway? What is bad anyway? How do irreligious, secular people determine what is good and what is bad? I seriously wonder that. On what basis would you say something is good or bad? Science teaches us how things work. From A to Z, it shows the processes. It shows how it works. But it doesn't tell us if it's good or bad. If it's morally something to reject or something to embrace. Science doesn't tell us that. So where does it leave us? That's the implication. Let's think about the implications. I think for religious as well as for irreligious people, this common belief about bad circumstances leaves a huge burden. Because what is the conclusion? You better be good. You better be good. Do your best. Work hard. It's you who have to do it. The pressure is on. So religious people might say, I will first get blessed when I behave well. When I do right, then I will be blessed. So I have to work like crazy. And I think very often the undercurrent is then fear, to be afraid. Because how would you know that you have done enough? How would you ever know that you have been good enough? For irreligious people it's different. If nature does not give you an objective source of morality, as we see, it doesn't actually, I think it's very hard to find out what is right and wrong. Like you say, why care anyways? If bottom line, it's all about the survival of the fittest. Without objective source of morality, popular opinion is changing all the time. It can easily change. And it does, all the time. Very uncertain. Now, do I say that secular people are immoral? No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. I just try to understand where they base that fundamentally, where they base their moral values on. That's the only thing I question. Now, in this story, this historic narrative, we see the Apostle Paul. And from condemning him to be a murderer in one moment, then idolizing him as he is a god. And this is not so far away, not so remote from our time as we initially think. Because we change our opinion very easily on things happening to us. Some examples. Lionel Messi. He has been criticized many times. He has been praised like an idol. One day later. How things change. Look at the last 20 years. How many countries, there is a vast majority, or at least a majority, support for same-sex marriage. For ages we haven't had that, and now there is a majority. How do we change? Slavery is abolished. Good thing. And meanwhile, we change to other forms of slavery. Whether it's work, whether it is a hobby, your appearance, your fitness, whatever. Many governments discouraged gambling. You've seen that. At the same time, the online betting business is going crazy. Why? I think because there is no objective source of morality. Or it's lacking or it's rejected. So common human beliefs, like bad people will suffer bad consequences, and all the religious and irreligious beliefs behind it, do not really help us. Do not really give the answer. They are vulnerable, they make us uncertain. And the question is, what's the alternative? What's the alternative to those religious beliefs and the beliefs around scientific naturalism, what basically says it's the laws of nature that determines everything? I want to highlight two things from this story. The common Christian belief. Paul had at least the following underlying beliefs. We know and we see him living those beliefs. He says we follow God's commandments and biblical wisdom in our daily lives, so that we will make wise decisions. Right. So you read Ephesians, you read Corinthians, he's showing that all the time. Yes. The Bible shows us wisdom and also how that often, let's say, turns into blessings. However, never automatically and never by default. Sometimes wise decisions still don't work out. Sometimes very bad decisions suddenly work out. Right? So many things happen, but they prove to be beyond our control. Out of our hands. That's something that Paul is testifying. Now you say, so is no point in taking wise decisions? Is that not important? I'm not saying that. There is a point in making wise decisions, and we should be wise, but it's not the end of everything, our wisdom. No, it is not. Ultimately, we cannot and we don't have to earn blessings here. We can't and we don't have to earn blessings by our good deeds, by our good behavior. How so? Because Jesus has already earned them 2,000 years ago at that cross. And the only response for us is to this tremendous proof of love is seeking to do what he wants us to do and to love others. Now you say, okay, nice, but what if something bad happens to me? Well, how does that help me? Like Paul, he got into trouble. He had not a nice life, an easy life. And that brings me to the second belief of the Christian faith. In a certain way, and this is a difficult topic I think, but I just want to put it out there. In a certain way, we receive what happens. We receive what happens, including bad and difficult things, as they are provided for, as they are allotted by God to us. Things happen in his providence. Now, what does that mean? God knows why things happen. God makes things happening, and he allows things to happen. For us, it's a matter to trust him that he knows what is right and what is good for us. And that we have a reason to trust him. That all things that he let happen, that work out for good for those who love him. Romans 8:28. Now the implication is, I think if you think this through, there's less pressure. There's less burden. Why? Ultimately, God determines. Ultimately, it's in his hands. If he won't make a mistake, but if I make a mistake, which can happen definitely, it does happen, he is able to make something good out of that. And also when I get to deal with things out of control, including bad things, ultimately these are not in my hands, they are in his hands. So these Christian beliefs, biblical wisdom for life, not earning God's favor, no, we don't have to, or his love, and his providence, they strike a stunning balance between two extremes. And I think it's very important that we somehow grasp that. Thinking that we have control in everything, that we have everything in our hands. That's the one extreme. And by consequence, everything is on my shoulders, on your shoulders. Because ultimately it's in your power. That's one extreme. And the other extreme is we get completely passive for two reasons. Either I say the laws of nature determines everything, so there's nothing for me to do. Or I say I have a particular picture of the sovereign deity, and he determines anyway, so well, for me it's nothing to do. Two extremes. The God of the Bible is sovereign and rules providentially, yes, but at the same time he leaves us to decide many things. He calls us to follow him, to follow his commandments, and he works out what is good through what we do and sometimes despite what we do. Now you say, okay, this is heavy stuff. Can I really rely on God? Am I willing to depend on Him? You might not like it, if He's all-powerful and all-knowing, that He pulls the strings of your life. To trust in this way, to surrender everything to Him. Let's look shortly at the last part of the passage. Maybe you can show the map. For those who were here last week, they have seen this map already. And it shows the whole journey that Paul had made from there, it's down in Jerusalem, Caesarea, up, and we see at the left side Malta. Thank you. Very, very, very appropriate. And then he moves last part, Syracuse, Rhegium, Puteoli. Okay? And what happened? They fly with... They don't fly, sorry. They don't fly. They go by boat. Alexandrian ship with the figurehead of the twin gods Castor and Pollux. Who are Castor and Pollux? They are twin sons of the Greek and Roman mythology. And they were supposed to be the protectors for the sailors. So why is it noted here, you say? Well, probably it's just a matter of accuracy, historic accuracy. You see the names, it was the case. But also, I think, the crew might have trusted those guys. But Luke is saying, readers, we know that God protected Paul and brought him to Rome. He really was executing, he was acting upon his promise to Paul. And then at the end it says, at this site that the people would come and welcome him. 3 taverns are even on. Up here 4 are even on. It's really detailed. Eh? Very good. Thank you. Thank you. When that happens, Paul thanked God and was encouraged. Interesting. Paul was longing. We know that from one of his letters, the letter to the Romans, that he was longing to meet these people. And of course, we know he didn't go there like an easy road. 4 shipwrecks. 4, I've counted. And many storms. Many divine detours. Moments that he had to go somewhere else and he testified, he witnessed about Christ. Not a straight way. Oh, nothing. And then his brothers and sisters came to welcome him. I try to picture. It's a joy if I see you on Sunday. But now think about, I have made a huge trip, a lot of hassle, trouble. I fear to lose my life. All happening this next week. And next Sunday I come here again. Well, I think I will embrace you differently. He did. He was really encouraged. He realized that God's promise and trusting God for His promise is justified. He is not just pulling the strings, God. No, He is a good Father, as we were singing about. He is a great King and a loving Lord. You might know the story about John Newton. I will keep it short. John Newton was an ex-sailor and ex-slave trader. In March 1748, he was sailing out in a ship, and the ship ended up in a violent storm. And he was fearing to sink, that the ship would sink. He cried to God for mercy. They survived. And that's what he later on describes as the starting point of his conversion. It was not quick and immediate. It was growing gradually. And he writes something. He has a very famous quote, I think. And I just want to say it because I think it's meaningful. He says the following memorable phrase. Everything is necessary that He sends. Nothing can be necessary that He withholds. I say that again. Everything is necessary that He sends, that He lets happen, that He wants to happen. Nothing can be necessary when He doesn't give it, when He withholds it. Would we trust Him that way? I wonder. Now you might still say, I have a level of scientific knowledge. Prove me. Prove me that He is real. Prove me He is good. You know, Jesus, the Son of God and the Son of Man, went into a storm. Not because he just ended up there, coincidentally. He has chosen to go into the storm. He stepped into the storm. To survive? No, to be killed. He stepped into the storm, which is our storm. Storm of sin and wrath, things that we did wrong, that we actually should be suffering for. He went into that storm and took the wrath and all the pain for you and me. You know, do you know him this way? Not in cold, controlling God, some pulling some strings, but a God who gave his own life just to get us out of the storm, the eternal storm of his wrath. I think he is the giver of common grace. You saw that. So when you encounter kind people, take it as God's gift and be kind. Always, of course. He is the giver of the uncommon belief, you could say, to deal how we deal with bad things. He providentially provides in your life. He guides you in really high mountains and in dark valleys. When we made wise decisions or when we really screwed up, he's still with us. When we believe and follow him, he points you to the right commandments to know what to do, but he himself is always in control. He ensures that you will come at the right destination in time, like Paul did. He will make sure one day. So let's pray.